Hi, my name is Hector Garcia. I'm a CPA and a QuickBooks consultant. This video is about learning how to download your transactions from your bank into QuickBooks Online. So we'll be 100% focused on QuickBooks Online for this video. I will create a separate set of videos for QuickBooks Desktop. Now, this video is also going to be split into 3 parts. Part 1, which is the one you're watching right now, will be all about how to connect your bank to QuickBooks and how to use that information to enter the data into your accounting. Part 2 of the video will talk about bank rules, and bank rules are ways you can program QuickBooks to automate some of these data entry, account classification, and things like that. And then part 3, we'll talk about what happens when you don't have access to the bank with a direct connection, and what are some of the manual ways we can upload the information if we happen to have it in Excel, PDF, or a different format that QuickBooks didn't automatically grab from the bank. Okay, so let's dig right in. So what you're seeing here on the screen is my brand new QuickBooks Online file. And the first thing I want to do is I want to establish that connection with the bank. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on the banking button on the left side of the screen. And once we click on banking, you may get a pop-up of a prompt asking you to enter the bank name so you can search it within the huge database of banks that QuickBooks connects to directly. If you're working with one of the big ones like Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, you're going to see it right there in the front of the screen as an icon. So you can just click on any of them. But if I were to use a different bank that's not here, let's say, for example, Bank of Blue Valley, whatever that is, right? So you can search your bank through here. Again, there is about 20 or 30,000 banks in that database. And if it's not there, that means it just can't do a direct connection and you have to do a manual upload, and you want to check out the 3rd installment of this video series for that. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Chase so I can establish my connection with Chase, and I'm going to put my user ID and password in there. And some banks will require, for extra security settings, for you to enter some special code that gets texted to your cell phone or email, or maybe even some second level security questions. So whatever that happens to be, you want to continue with the prompt. And while it makes the connection, it usually takes 15 to 20 seconds. It will prompt you for every single downloadable account. Now, not all your accounts are downloadable. It all depends on your bank. Some banks make only the business accounts available for download and not the personals. Some make both available. Some make mortgages or loans available. Some make every individual sub-account under a credit card also available for download. So you want to pay real close attention to the long list of accounts that the bank is allowing you to connect with. Now, let's assume that from this list, I have one business account and one credit card account. So I'm going to click on my business account and I'm going to select checking. And only the ones that I select here are the ones that are going to be downloading the transactions from. And then let me pick up my credit card and I'm going to select credit card. So it's that simple. Just go through the list and only select the bank accounts in which you want to download information into your QuickBooks. Of course, if you have personal accounts and things like that, you definitely shouldn't connect them. Otherwise, your books are going to be all over the place. So only focus on those accounts that contain the business transactions that matter for your accounting purposes. And when it's completed doing the connection, you're typically going to see all the transactions already in the screen. In my particular screen, it's just asking me to click one more button that says review your transactions, and that's okay. I'll go ahead and click on that. Now, depending on when you connect your QuickBooks file, QuickBooks may detect you to be a new user or maybe an experienced user, and it may want to walk you through the process. If it's trying to do that like the way you're seeing on the screen now, I usually just click on where it says, skip this, or I'm a pro or something like that, because what I'm going to show you, it is the single fastest way of doing it. So if you follow the prompts, which is fine as a new user, but I think you should go for the pro version of it, which is what I'm going to show you. Now, what you're seeing on the screen is pretty straightforward. I see my business bank account on the left side, and then I see my business credit card on the right side. Now I can also click on the drop-down menu up here, and I can quickly select them through here. So I can either hit the drop-down or click on the actual account card that I see here on the screen. Now the reason why you need to know this drop-down is because here on the right side, you're going to see a little tiny triangle, which is a minimize button. So when I click on that, that's going to hide those two cards that are on the top, and it's going to give me a lot more real estate on the screen, which is crucial for dealing with a lot of transactions at the same time. And this is where the drop down becomes really handy. Now, a couple other navigation tips while we're on the screen. On the top of the screen, we're going to see a button that allows me to collapse the left navigation panel. And in this particular screen, there really isn't any need for me to be dealing with a left navigation panel. So I'm not as likely to be using it. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that button and collapse it. And that's going to collapse it all the way to the left. And again, give me more real estate for me to work on. Now, depending on which browser you're using, you should be using Google Chrome. But if you usually you hit Control Plus or Control minus, depending on whether you're on a Mac or a PC. It may be Command Plus if we're talking on a Mac. But once you do that, it allows you to zoom in and out. So I'm actually just hitting that on my keyboard here, zoom in and out. So that allows me to figure out exactly what is the optimal way for me to work. So do I want big text or do I want a lot of transactions on the page at the same time? Definitely that's up to you. Another really important navigation tip is here on the right side of the screen. You're going to see a little tiny gear a button that's called the settings button. And when I click on that, it gives me a couple of really interesting settings. I'm going to start with this one called compact. And what the compact one allows me to do is to just basically, instead of having double spacing between the transactions, it just compacts them a little bit, as you know, as it says, and it fits in a little bit more transactions on the screen at the same time. I can also choose to show more rows. Maybe I want to show only 50 transactions, or I want to show 300 transactions at a time. As a matter of fact, if you look at that little number there, it tells you how many transactions are pending for me to load into QuickBooks. From the other settings are here, you can also add the column for the check number. So if I click on that and enable that, you will see that there will be a column dedicated to just the check numbers or the transaction numbers if they download specifically for the check number. So if you want to see that as a separate number, why? Because maybe I want to sort it by check number, and maybe I want to work in all checks in one shot. Like for example, I can click on check number and sort them by check number. And I'm going to see all the blanks in the bottom. But if I scroll all the way in the top, all the way to the bottom, I'm going to see all of the check numbers. So if I like to focus on check numbers first, for example, I can do that through here. In some cases, when I'm working on some of my clients' books, I don't have the check images right away, but I still want to just bring them all into QuickBooks in one shot. And I could do that by selecting them all in batch and bringing them in. More on that to come. Let's cover other areas in the settings button as well. We also have the capacity to show and hide the payee column. Now that's a tough one. In some cases, people hide the payee column. Like in this case, it's blank because this is my actual vendor's name inside QuickBooks. And when they hide that, they tend to forget to create the vendor in QuickBooks, and that creates kind of a mess. So I don't know under what situation it would be useful to hide it. So I would say don't hide it. Now there's also this little interesting one that says editable date field. And what that does is if I enable that, it allows me to, once I click on the transaction, it allows me to actually change the date of the transaction. Now normally we don't want to do that because the date that it came to the bank is the date that it came to the bank. However, there are cases in which maybe I'll swipe a credit card over the weekend and the weekend was a 30th or a 31st, and then the transaction posts on Monday or Tuesday, and that ends up, let's say, crossing the month. And maybe under those cases, I want to change the date, but normally I don't. Now, something else that I really, really like is this little checkbox that says copy bank detail to memo. Basically, that says that whatever the bank called the transaction, whatever the text came through on the download, it's going to copy itself on the memo. So whether or not you put the correct vendor name, you will always have that original text exactly as the bank saw it. And that is really, really useful stuff. So I love that. And that's checked by default. So I really think That's great. Now, this little checkbox here, really useful too. It says show bank details. When I click on that, what happens is instead of QuickBooks trying to decipher what you downloaded, it actually gives me the raw data from the bank. And maybe that's better than QuickBooks trying to figure out what it is. For example, take a look at this vendor here. This vendor is called Super Arepa Pembroke Pines. So Super Arepa is the name of the restaurant. It's a Latin restaurant. And then Pembroke Pines here is the city where it resides. That's the state, and that's the date of the transaction. Now, that's the raw data that came through the bank. I want you to pay close attention to what happens when I click on that gearbox and I turn off show bank details. Okay, notice that now this QuickBooks cleaned that up and called it Super Arepa Pembroke. That could be fine or maybe not. The challenge is that sometimes it doesn't get it quite right. Now, it's getting better and better. I'm noticing that QuickBooks is getting better and better and kind of interpreting that information for us. And I suspect that Intuit uses the aggregate value of all the QuickBooks users to try to maybe figure out what people are doing and go from there. But sometimes I'm scared about Intuit or not Intuit itself, but their software, the computer system, picking it up wrong and just getting massively confused and getting the user confused as well. So just know that I have the complete control over seeing the raw bank data versus seeing, let's say, the QuickBooks interpreted data. Okay, so I'm gonna leave it on the raw bank data because I'm actually a fan of that option. Now let's talk about classifying the transactions. These are some of the most important fundamental things about bank feeds. It's classifying them. So typically what we do is we go to a transaction that we recognize. So for example, the same one we were talking about, we click on it, and then under it, it expands a whole bunch of options. One, it tells you, is this an add or is this a match? Okay, so I'm gonna talk about matching a little bit later on. So we're gonna focus on add for the time being. So this is the add one. And notice that I have this editable check number here, which I don't need. So I'm actually gonna go back and take out the check number. That way I'm not cluttering the screen with stuff I don't need. Perfect. So now the first box that is telling me is, what is the payee? Now it says optional there. Now I'm telling you, and I'm suggesting to you, they're kidding. It's not optional. You have to put a vendor name there. And it may take a whole another video to explain to you why, because there are reporting capabilities that QuickBooks has that are quite powerful, but you lose them when you don't put the vendor's name. So it says optional, but I'm making the personal suggestion that you don't take that literal, that you actually create a vendor for each restaurant or store that you go to. So I'm gonna go in, I'm just gonna type in the name of the vendor, okay? And I'm gonna click on the add button, and then it will ask me, is this going to be a detail ad, where basically I'm gonna add the address and all that stuff, or just going to be a regular ad, okay? And I'm just gonna click on save for a regular ad. And then it's also asking me whether it's a customer, employee, or vendor. I'm gonna leave it at vendor. Golden rule, everybody you pay is vendor. Golden rule, everybody you pay, vendor. Make everybody vendor. Unless you're an employee on payroll or a customer that you invoice, it should be vendor. So use that as the golden rule. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on save. And now I added Super Arepa as a vendor in my permanent database of vendors. So next time it shows up, I'm not gonna have to create it. I'll just pull it from my current vendor list. Now, QuickBooks suggested the category meals and entertainment. Why I did that? Because maybe some other users in QuickBooks have done that, and maybe that's what makes sense. I sincerely doubt that QuickBooks or Intuit knows what this place even is, but through the aggregate information and artificial intelligence of all the QuickBooks users, I assume this is how the suggestions come about. Now, these suggestions are not always right, and you are responsible for making sure this is correct, especially when we're dealing with taxes and audits and stuff like that. They're not gonna take responsibility over the categorization, the user is. So it's really important that if you don't know how to do this, that you get formal training or you work with an accountant, with a QuickBooks consultant. But assuming that you know how to categorize things, then just give them a category, leave the one that's there or change it, whatever you want to do. So this is going to be an add. I'm going to create a new transaction, and then I'm going to click on the add button. And perfect. It goes away from my list. Now it's sitting in my bank register. Let's do a couple of more, and then we're going to go to our bank register. So I'm going to go here into Starbucks. Okay, we see right here, this is called Starbucks store, whole bunch of stuff. I'm not going to create a vendor with that long name. I'm just going to call it Starbucks. And what's nice is I can just copy, I can just copy and paste that straight in here and click on add vendor, and it creates the vendor. Now, maybe this is meals and entertainment. Maybe it is something else. I'm going to leave it in that category for now and then click on add. And then when you start noticing here, if there is a pattern, QuickBooks will start moving things to recognize. I guess it hasn't caught a pattern yet. Okay, let's go to some other place here. We got here Walmart. So it has all this code there. I'm just gonna copy the part that I want, copy it from the memo and paste it in the payee side. You don't have to copy paste, you can type it. Add as a vendor and maybe make this office supplies. There you go, office supplies and software, and then click on add, and then add that category in there. Okay, let me just go up here to see. Okay, so it looks like now it added one to recognize. That means it found a pattern. That means there must have been another transaction in Walmart where QuickBooks now says, okay, maybe I should start picking up some of the heavy lifting for you. So I'm going to click on that button there that says recognize, and that's going to narrow it down to another Walmart transaction, notice, and it's actually auto classifying it for me. So all I have to do at this point is just click on add. Okay, so very good. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to all, and then I'm going to click on bank detail, and I'm going to sort them, and I'm going to look for something that maybe has another pattern that repeats itself quite a bit. So let me see if I have a vendor. Okay, there it is. We got BMW Financial. So we got 3 payments to BMW Financial. Okay, so I'm going to grab one of them and then create the vendor, BMW Financial, and then click on add, save. And then this is under car and truck. That may be correct or not, depends. You know, you may want to talk to your accountant about this, but if this is a lease, it could be an expense. But if this is a purchase, technically that goes to the loan. So I don't want to get too much into it. Let's assume it's a lease, and then we'll leave it right there under car and truck. Or I can create an account. So I can call this vehicle lease. Okay, and then click on add. And if I misspelled it, I have one more chance here to fix it. Okay, so it's an expense category. And then the detail type subcategory, that's not really important. So you can leave the one that's there in default. But if you're really kind of anal about these details, then just go ahead and change it there if you want to. It doesn't matter. Detail type doesn't matter. Matter of fact, a lot of my colleagues and myself, when we meet each other, we're like, what the heck is detail type? Nobody knows, nobody cares. But if you want to put something there, put it. If not, it doesn't matter. That's really there as kind of like help for non-accountant users. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on save and close. It creates now the expense category called vehicle lease. And now I'm gonna click on add. And you will notice that the 2 transactions under it, BMW Financial, that came in twice, 2 other months, they get automatically classified, but they don't get automatically added into the books. On the second video from the series, we'll be talking about bank rules, and we can talk about how to take some of these and automatically add them. Because in some cases you want to double check that it's right before you add them. In some cases you want to say, yep, absolutely, if this is this name, send it straight into the book. So I can actually grab both of these transactions by clicking on 2 check marks, and then I can scroll up and click on batch actions and click on accept selected. Okay, and that would actually bring those 2 transactions into the register by themselves. Another really important trick here on this theme of adding transactions is, let me pick something else here. Let's see. Okay, I got this 3 Google payments. Okay, so let's say, for example, that these 3 Google payments are all one specific thing. So what I can do is I can select the one all the way in the top, and then find the last one on the series that are all pretty much the same. Hit the shift button on the keyboard, and then click on the last one. That's going to select all those transactions. And then I can scroll up here, and then where it says batch actions, I'm going to click on modify selected. So what's really cool about this modify selected option is that it's going to, in batch, select the payees for all those transactions and the categories. Instead of me just doing one, waiting for it to recognize it and then adding it, I'm going to do it all in one shot. So let's say, for example, this is Google Payments. I'm going to add that as a vendor. Now I can add it as a vendor or a customer. In this case, let's say they're paying me, but I'm going to add them as a vendor anyway because I don't invoice them. And then on the category, I'm going to put it under, let's say, sales. Like Google's paying me for, I don't know what Google's paying me for. Oh, that's for my YouTube videos. So I'm going to click on apply, and then that will categorize those transactions. I can come down here and just confirm. Okay, let me just try this again, make sure this is right. Batch actions, modify selected, put Google Payments, category, sales, and then apply. Perfect. So once those are set, I can just click on batch actions, accept, and those three will come into my books. Let's see what happened here. Let me click on each one to see. Okay, for some reason they went straight into this transfer, so this could just be an error in the reading. So I'm going to click on add. Okay, and then click on. So it didn't take it because for some reason thought that it was going to be a deposit or a payment of some sort. So I can just manually correct this one. Very good that this happened during the video. That way you kind of see some of the little things that happen along the way. So I had to switch it to add, click on the add button, and then hopefully these two will get fixed. Now they didn't, so let me do them real quick. I may have to explore specifically why that happened, but you know what? No, I don't think videos should be perfect. I actually kind of like the fact that we get errors on the fly, because this does happen in reality. Now, if I was to create a rule for this beforehand, none of this stuff would have happened, because QuickBooks wouldn't try to guess what it is. All these problems happen because QuickBooks is trying to guess what this is, and that's good, that's great. But of course, you know, computers are not perfect. So, and that's a perfect example of that. But here's another one. Check this one out. We have Intuit Payments account fee. This is like charges that I get for charging my clients with a credit card. So I'm going to select one, go all the way down. Notice this is a huge list of them. Okay, all the way down to the last one. There it is. That's like 20 or 30 transactions. I'm going to go to batch actions, modify, and then I'm going to call this Intuit Payment Solutions. That's my merchant account vendor. Under category, we're gonna put him. Let's say we're gonna put him under bank charges and fees. I'm not saying that's accurate. I'm saying that's where I'm gonna put it. Click on apply, and then once I scroll down, I should see all those things there. There we go. So now you see all those things being categorized to my vendor into Payment Solutions and my account bank service charges. So I can scroll back up, click on batch actions, and then click on accept. Now, one thing I want to tell you, when you scroll down like this, notice that this title goes away. Wouldn't it make sense that this right here becomes fixed? Kind of like a fixed header in Excel, like a freeze frame. That way, when we're scrolling all the way down, we have access to that button. Yeah. So if you do see that change happen, notice that it was probably me in this video making the suggestion that caused Intuit to make the change. But that would be nice, that when I scroll down, that menu would be fixed in there. So anyway, I'm going to click on accept selected, and then all the things will be added into the books. And then we'll stop it for now. That's enough examples to kind of know how to add transactions. What I like to do is I'm going to click here on the right side and click on go to register, so I can see what the bank register looks like. And what I'm seeing here is the actual transactions that were posted into the books. This is the stuff that is now posted into the books, that is showing up as an expense or a sale, and you see them in here. And these are all the things that were posted in the books, and all of these came straight from bank feeds. And one of the ways you know it came from bank feeds is on the right side of the screen, you have this column and you have a C, which means cleared. That means it cleared the bank. Of course, if you brought it from bank feeds, it cleared the bank. And then you see that little icon there that looks like those little two boxes. That basically lets you know that was added from the bank. Now, I want to show you something else. I want to go back into my bank feeds window. So let me go back into banking. and I want to show you matching. Matching is different than adding. Adding means the transaction was never in QuickBooks, and I'm using the bank feeds, the bank downloads to create them. But there are cases in which there's already a transaction in QuickBooks and I have to match them. For example, take a look at this deposit for $18.25. You know, what if there had been an invoice for that amount and I come in the bank and I add it? I'm going to essentially duplicate the transaction, duplicate the income. So what I want QuickBooks to do is to ask me, hey, should I add this or should I match it to an existing transaction? So I'll show you that real quick. Let me click on the Quick Create button and click on Create Invoice. And I kind of just want you to imagine that we already had this invoice from before. That it's not that we are creating the invoice on the fly while we're doing bank feeds. That's typically not the workflow. Like we create the invoice before and then we download the bank and then it matches together. But normally we really don't do that stuff where we create an invoice on the fly when we download the bank. Typically we create the invoice, send it to the client, they pay us, then it comes into the bank. So the typical workflow is this would have been done before typically. So I'm gonna go ahead and let me just put this invoice for, let's say, April 1st, 2017, and then click on Save and Close. And you will notice that when I'm on bank feeds, this is gonna now behave different. Now, instead of prompting me to create a new transaction, this says, hey, this download pretty much matches a transaction exact to the penny and is suggesting for me to match it. Now, I can still click on Add and override the match, but that initial match, that's why it says possible match, right? It doesn't know, but it's assuming that it is. Remember, QuickBooks is not going into that deposit and reading the check image from the customer and matching it. It doesn't know that. The only information that it has handy is the fact that the dollar amount and the dates are the same, or the dates are similar, but the dollar amounts are the same. So at this point, I just click on match and that's it. Now, matching may be a little bit more complex than that. For example, let's say that I have two invoices that add up to $800. So how would that work? Well, let's try that. So I'm going to create one invoice and I'll select the same dummy customer I have here, and I'll do one invoice for $300, and then I'll click on Save and New, and then I'll do a different invoice for, let's say, $500. So we're gonna create a combination of invoices that add up to that deposit, because that's also a normal day-to-day transaction where we get more than one check and we deposit it all in one shot, but the bank never really separates those deposits. So I'm gonna go ahead and close that. And we're gonna see that $800 now is not doing a match. Why is it not doing a match? Let me just click out of there for a second. Why is it not doing a match? Is because there isn't a single transaction that matches it one-to-one. So I actually have to go to Find Match, and I'm gonna get a new window, and then I can now select multiple invoices that add up to that deposit. At that point, you would probably have to have the deposit slip in front of you or some detailed information about the deposit to know which invoices are being paid on this particular deposit that contains more than one customer. So let me go ahead and click on Save. And I'll do one more example under the same theme. Let's say, for example, this one for $845 also comes from multiple invoices. So I'm gonna go into New, and then I'm gonna click on Invoice, and I'll do the same thing. I'm gonna create a customer, and I'll do one for $800, and then I'll do another one for $45. That way we have two combined. So I'm gonna show you similar example, but a little bit of a different workflow. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this. So now I have two transactions that add up to the $845. So as I mentioned before, I can click in here, click on Find Match, select the two, match them, and click Save. Yes, I could have done that. But let's say, for example, that as part of your workflow, you not only create those invoices, you also receive those payments. So if part of my workflow before doing bank feeds was to receive the payments, let me show you how that would look. So I'm going to click on Add, and then I'm going to click on Receive Payment. And then I'll select my customer here. and then I'll select one of the invoices that is being paid. So I'm going to do this individually. So I got one of the payments, let's say via check, and I'll put here 1, 2, 3, 4, and then deposit to. You want to bring this into an account that's not the bank account straight, because you want those deposits to then go from the bank, from the payment to the bank, but you want to bundle them together based on the same way you did the deposit. So normally what you do is you put this into an account called undeposited funds. So what you do is you create an undeposited funds account. So you click on account type, other current assets, and then you come down here and you put undeposited funds. So you create an undeposited funds account. I'm going to click save and close, and you put it in there. That's going to be a temporary holding account sitting there waiting for you to then make the deposit to then move it into the bank. And that's crucial for when you're going to include receiving payments as part of your workflow before you do the download. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and click on save and new, and then let's say I'm going to receive the other payment, and let's say this time I got paid in cash, and that's also going to go into the undeposited funds account, and then I'll click on save and new. So now I got two payments that went not to the bank, that went to undeposited funds, but my bank feeds is still not detecting it. Now, if I click on find match, I can actually pick them up from there. So the find match will pick them up from open invoices and also from received payments in undeposited funds. So that's one way. The other way is, again, if you receive the payments and also create the deposit in QuickBooks as part of your workflow before you do the bank download, you can click on create button, and then you can click on bank deposit. And then again, this is before you do the bank download. You select the two payments you're going to deposit, select the date more or less that you're going to deposit it, whatever the date is that you were going to do that, and then you select the bank account that you're going to deposit to, and then you click here on save and close. So you actually created that deposit before you did the bank download, but then when you do the bank download, this will now say match. Now, why does it say match? Because I created the entire workflow in QuickBooks before getting there. So at that point, I'll just select it, and then I can just click on, let me zoom out for a second. I can click on the match button here on the right side, or I can click on batch actions accept. So either way works. I will show you one more thing, which is matching payment. So let's say, for example, we got this check here, check 137. Let's say I were to create a bill or a bill payment or something like that before the bank gets downloaded. So right now it's asking me to do something, but if I had created a check beforehand, I just want to show you what that looks like. So I'm going to create a check, and again, making the assumption that I would create these checks before doing the bank download. So that's 137, and that was, I'll just pick whatever account here, and I'll put here $4,000. Okay, so again, the workflow was I created the check before doing the bank download, and I'm gonna click here on save and close, and you will notice that when I go back into my bank downloads, that will come up as a match. So that comes in as a match. Instead of asking me what you want me to do with it, it's going to match it to something else. That way you don't have to do anything else. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and click on match. Okay, at the end of the day, you want to make sure you go through all these, and then you still have to go reconcile the bank, because you want to make sure that the data is complete, that you don't have duplicates, that you didn't make a mistake. So you always want to make sure you come into Reconcile, and you're going to grab the actual bank statement from your bank on every month, and you're going to follow through. You're going to put the ending balance, whatever it happens to be, right? You're going to put the ending balance there, the date of the last month that you're reconciling. I don't want to spend too much time on reconciling. That's definitely another video. And then you're going to double check that all the transactions from your paper statement match QuickBooks. And at that point, you will have a zero difference here on the right. And then you'll know it's accurate, or at least that it is complete. A couple of notes. So that's it with bank feeds. A couple of notes. This technique of downloading straight from the bank, it's awesome. One of the huge pros to that is that QuickBooks will connect with your bank daily, and it will bring in those transactions daily, which will really help you catch up and do those books on time. And the other pro, again, is you have all these nice different things you can do. You can add, you can match, you can really speed up the process, because the date and the amount, those are fixed numbers. Those will never change. Maybe the vendor name has to be interpreted, and the category, of course, has to be interpreted. So that's the part where it's actually work. Now, the only con that I have with this, or the only thing I dislike about it, is that number one, if you start a direct connection, QuickBooks is limited to 90 days. So when it downloads the transactions, it will only download 90 days worth of transactions. Actually, it will download 90 days worth no matter what. So in some cases, I need less than 90 days, and I have to delete them from the bank feeds. That's actually an okay problem to have. But in a lot of cases, I need more than 90 days. So on the third installment of this video, not the second, but the third, we'll talk about downloading a whole year's worth, 2 years worth, or using different formats to upload it into QuickBooks, because that's a whole nother world there. Anyway, this tutorial was to help you understand bank feeds, download the transactions. If you think this video will save you time, I want you to put comments below and put how this video made you feel. If you think it's awesome, amazing, and if there's other types of videos or things you think I didn't cover, put it down there. The comments really encourage me to create more videos and know what people want to learn. Also, subscribe to the channel, so next time I make a video or next videos coming up, I usually make 1 or 2 videos a week. You get instant notification of that. And of course, hit like, tell all your friends to hit like as well. If you have any questions, my email is below, and the links to the other videos will be posted in the comment section below as well. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.